All right, hi guys, welcome to the Genius Podcast.
Hi, it's Tobias. Здравствуйте. It's our friend here. For the very first time, we have a guest, Ilya. Maybe do you want to introduce yourself? Tell the audience where you're from, where did we meet, and some small intro.
Yeah, sure. Hi, Tobias. Hi, Jeanine. It's really nice that you're having me here today. I'm really starting to be a fan of Genius Podcast, so nice. It's really nice to be a participant, not just a listener. So yeah, my name is Ilya. I'm originally from Moscow. I moved to Germany almost 4 years ago already, so it's a long time. So I did my bachelor in Russia, and then I moved here for my master's. I finished it a couple of months ago, and now I'm starting to work here in Aachen. I started already, and so far it's a short presentation of myself. So when we actually met,
it's a funny story, right? We met actually through Jeanine, because I learned Russian, and I think our common friend, she wanted to have a language partner for German.
Yeah, because this is what I remember. So I've seen your friends Anton and Anna, in a lot of a few of my classes, and I'd never really talked to them, but we'd always make eye contact and kind of just be like,
because
hey.
There was a time you're still taking courses, you take some courses in parallel with us, right?
Yeah. And then I think Anton posted on the Facebook group or whatever, and was just hi, I speak Russian and I want to practice German.
Yeah, right.
And then I was like, oh yeah, I know somebody. Tobias is learning Russian, and he's a native speaker. And then you guys all became best friends somehow.
Then we
and then we never talked English or Russian or German ever again.
This classic story. Looking for a language partner, and then you just become friends, and then you just talk English.
Oh because we met you because we were watching. Is it Brat?
Brat.
Yeah, Russian movie from the 90s.
And they're just our roommate is coming, and I was just
yes, right. That's exactly. I think that's the first time we met, right?
Yeah.
Because I was at the gym, and then I came back, and you were there watching Brat with Anton and Anna, right?
Yeah.
Then I think when we met. Well, you see, so somehow Russian culture connects all the points together.
Yeah,
that is mainly, I would say, our topic of today. We want to encounter all these stupid stereotypes of the Russians are this and the Germans are in that direction. So I think I did some trips during my PhD to Russia, and I really fell in love with the culture and also the language, and I think that maybe we can just the rough outline would be just to talk about Russia today. How do younger people see the West, how they act, and maybe a good starting point would be this movie Brat, right?
Yeah.
And what is this movie so special about, and especially about the 90s in Russia? I remember you were talking a lot about this crucial period after the Soviet Union died, and then maybe you can talk a bit about how also your family was shaped by it, and what this movie Brat means for Russians.
Man, it's extremely interesting question. I can talk for hours about it. So.
Yeah, we have enough time. We have enough time. There's no time limit.
Yeah, it's really nice that you ask. So, actually, Brat, it's it's a movie. I think it's the most it has a cult status in Russia, and because it perfect description of this period, of this time period, as you said, in the 19th, after the Soviet Union collapsed, and what is so special about it, because it managed to picture the zeitgeist of this particular period, because it was kind of harsh, because it was economic crisis, and there was, after the Soviet Union, 1991, the breakup of the Soviet Union, and the whole period, it was defined by poverty, and a lot of criminal issues also arised. But it's it was just collapse of an empire and all bad stuff that was kind of kept a bit under the hood. It just popped up, and then it was also like the period. It's very ambiguous, you know. Like from one point of view, it's like there was decade of opportunities. And for example, my family, like my father, he actually managed like to take some kind of advantage of it. He was an engineer in the Soviet Union. He worked for the like basically for the Soviet like war machine. So he worked in like the military in the military factory, like as an engineer. And then it was the time when the free market started, and he also started to take advantage of the new opportunities that arise. So actually, but a lot of people, like generally speaking, they found themselves a bit lost because nobody taught them how to behave in this new system, like the free market. Because in Soviet Union it was like the planned economy, right? So you get basically what they give you. But in the capitalism, when it started, like it was from one point of view, like it is generally good that we finally abandoned this system, the old system. But from one point of view, it's very hard to shift, because when people don't know how to behave in the system, nobody have taught them how to do. It could be very difficult. It's a very difficult situations. Also, a lot of like the whole, like from the political point of view, the way how it was done, it was pretty harsh. Like there was in the 1993, for example, there was kind of like a revolution also in Moscow and Yeltsin, the former president of Russia, break up all the protests, and then he absorbed like more presidential power, and then it was also, this period was also like defined by this oligarch system, right? When we have like a number of families, and the president is surrounded with this very strong oligarchs who actually benefit from the collapse. When the Soviet system collapsed, they basically just took everything that was lying on the ground.
They had these, I think they had these, what I read, they had a system of these vouchers.
Yes, exactly.
And then these oligarchs, so maybe here to explain, oligarchs would be Abramovich, the guy, the owner from Chelsea. Or we had this case, really famous case here, always debated in the West, Khodorkovsky, and then they managed somehow to amass a lot of these vouchers, and then they get this status that they can kind of own the like commodity sector of oil, or mining industry, so they got more and more vouchers. But I think in the beginning the system was good, because everybody, like before in the system, they got a voucher, but then some people were managing to like trick people and getting more and more vouchers. Is that true? Is that like basically how it worked?
How do you trick people?
I mean, I'm not an economist. I'm also not that familiar with this particular topic. But the main idea was that just it was not equal. Like the whole process was called like privatization, like because they were basically national property, then needed to go like to the private property, and then this shift, the way it was performed and like implemented by the government, it was criticized a lot, because it gave more. It gave like more the people who were initially actually having some power during the Soviet Union, they actually the ones who benefited after. So the main then I say it's like ambiguous situation, because it sounded like it was a huge like revolution when the Soviet Union collapsed, but actually, in my point of view, it's like the same people who were in power before, they basically just deconstructed the old system and then like constructed the new ones, but they still remain in power basically. So it was not actually it was not like a true change of the system. So that's the main point. And now, so basically you're just changing colors. Like it's very like opportunistic. Like when they realize that Soviet Union doesn't work anymore, like the system is basically financially it's not beneficial, then they just change the system so they could continue to benefit from it. And then why actually a lot of people who were like in the Communist Party, they were the ones who absorbed a lot of wealth during the 90s as well. But as I said, it's like still there was some window of opportunity also for people who were not part of establishment or the former establishment. Like my father, he was never part of any kind of like, he was actually kind of like revolutionary in the 80s. I mean,
he was. That's interesting. You were telling me before that he was more also into a bit of like American culture even. Like, how was that? Like, could you get access to the Western culture more, or is it like, how did it work for instance for your father?
It's very interesting. Like for my father, because he was a son of a military officer, and my grandfather, he was like doing military service on the submarine. So he was a like, how do you call it, like submarine
officer, or how
would
you call it?
I don't know what to call it.
Yeah, because
submarinist.
In English doesn't sound natural. Yeah, and also like he was like he had crazy amount of stories. Unfortunately, he passed away last year, but we have some videos when he talks about the stories that he lived through, and some of them they're crazy because it was just like Cold War, and then he was on the like atomic submarine, right? In the in the Pacific, in the Pacific Ocean, and they had some encounters with like American atomic submarines.
Oh god, yeah.
And it was just so. I mean, that's a whole different topic, right? We're not.
Yeah, you can tell the story because I think that it might be really interesting.
Yeah, because it was like this whole situation was like when there was like Cold War, and they do some like not like some kind of surveillance from Americans for Russians and Russians for Americans. So they kind of like, and sometimes they countered very closely, and it was always very like tense because I mean, it's like two atomic submarines, and when they get closer, and then basically any like wrong movement could bring us to the World War. Could trigger the World War.
So, that was the case there was an exercise called Able Archer, where just one guy, I think later, he received some medal of honor because I forgot his name.
I also like the guy who prevented the World War.
He last minute he decided to go against like this whole process of decision making, and then for his bravery he received some honors or so.
I forgot his name, but I recently read an article about him, and it was really like that. So it was just like one human saved us from the tragedy. And I mean, there were some cases, I think it was not the only one, so I think there were some other like bad situations. So that was the story about like my grandfather. And then because he was a military officer, he moved a lot also around Russia. So he did it in Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky. It's like Kamchatka, it's like a peninsula close to the Alaska.
Far eastern
Russia. So Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky, also Balaklava, it's in Crimea, and and then my father, when he was young, when he was a kid, when he lived in Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky, it's pretty close to the US, right? Like to Alaska, I don't know how, I mean, it's not that close, I think it's still like 1,000 kilometers or whatever, but still he was like good with technology and stuff, so he could actually listen to the Voice of America. There was an American radio station which transmitted like the this kind of the voice of the free world to the Soviet Union.
Like now in North Korea, they are doing this, like, how do you call it? Like they're trying to blast their propaganda through Southern Korea. Or
really?
Yeah.
Northern through South.
Are they trying to do that, or
that was like in Burning? You can in the movie that we discussed.
I thought that was for like the North Koreans, not for the South Koreans.
Probably both ways.
Could be, that makes sense.
I heard like the South Koreans, they dropped some kind of
maybe they also
some newspapers on.
That's soft power. I think it's an interesting concept, like to encounter if there are two different systems, also to have like soft power, you want to persuade the other by the strength of your not like only military but also like cultural power. And how did your father then so he was listening to this radio and what like how did it continue?
It's like, as you said, like anything begin with the soft power because, and in this case it was rock music because okay. It was not even, like political propaganda. I think it was mainly like rock music, and it was the time. It was, roughly like the 60s. So it was the time when everything began, like the rock music.
68 Revolution, Woodstock maybe.
Woodstock, like Summer of Love and stuff like that. Yeah, so he was mainly in this. He was a fan like of the Doors, Creedence Clearwater Revival, these like classic rock bands, and I think that's what kind of like also broadened his mind, and he was like mainly I wouldn't say revolutionary, but he was like in opposition to the Soviet system in general. Then in the 80s, when like people started to realize that it's coming to an end, basically, then he also participated in some like democratic movement. He was distributing some democratic, like newspapers, like underground newspapers.
Cool.
We had like around Moscow, I guess. That was the stories, like the legends about my father. maybe I just coming up with some random stuff right now. Maybe I'm just but I think that was.
He also had a Western car. I remember you saying that. Like,
what? Sorry?
Did he also own a car from the West?
When the borders were open.
Okay, after the border.
After I think still during the Soviet Union. I think in the 1990 because the border, like when perestroika already happened. Like perestroika, that was that was Gorbachev started with like rebuilding the Soviet system. He tried to rebuild it, to do it more like in the to open the free market a bit and to introduce the freedom of speech. It's called like another Russian concept that became very known worldwide. It's glasnost. Basically, it means freedom of speech. So it never worked because that was the grounding parts of the Soviet system. So without without propaganda, without idealistic concept of socialism, it just couldn't work. So that's why it collapsed. But that was the initial goal. And my father, when the borders were open, I think in the 1990, he went to Germany, I guess, and he bought like a car, like an old BMW. But he was like the old BMW in Moscow in 1990s was it was like wow. So as I said, like I really like my father. He was very very smart but also an engineer, but he was also this like kind of like protagonist type who is always up to something, who is always do something for the family, that's why even like when everything started, when like the window of opportunities was opened up a bit, he was starting to kind of to do something to benefit from it. But as I said, he was not never a part of like a communist establishment or whatever, but of course he was to some extent privileged because he was born in the military officer family, and of course like military officers in Soviet Union, they lived relatively better than anybody else, I would say, because military in Soviet Union it was a big deal, right? That's why he initially get this glimpse of Western culture by listening the Voice of America. Then in the 80s he was part of the democratic movement, and then when everything collapsed, he had some crazy stories about like 1993 when that happened, when basically the president of Russia, Yeltsin, had a conflict with the parliament, and in the parliament it's called it was still like kind of like a double phase system, because the parliament was still kind of formed during the Soviet times, but now it was like a new country, Russian Federation, and then Yeltsin was implementing more like liberal policies in terms of economical policies, like like more like free market stuff, like vouchers, what you said, privatization and stuff. And parliament, it was more like still more left wing, and they had a conflict about like how you redistribute this wealth among Russians after the breakup. So, and there was like actually a kind of like a violent conflict in the end, because Yeltsin even...
There were tanks, I remember. There were tanks on the street. You can check it probably on YouTube or so. Like, these scenes are
it was crazy. And my father was there. Like, my father was also like... he was smart, but sometimes he was like too brave in the sense that he wanted to see it from their own eyes. Yeah. So it was 1993, and when the tanks, there was a fight between like the army who was loyal to Yeltsin and the combatants or like some militants who were loyal to the parliament. And then my father, when the parliament was attacked by the tanks, my father was there, and he even brought my brothers there. And my brothers were like 13 years old, and I was like, when I hear the story, like, what were you thinking? Like, but it was like part of the history. It was just like the huge milestone, but he never he just wanted to see what's going on. He's still saying that he is one of the most like surrealistic memories that he has, because there was like these tanks were like standing on the bridge and they were like firing, and next to them there were some Buddhists singing Hare Krishna. And really? Everything at the same time, because
like, I don't know, coincidence or
no, but they were just like praying for peace or whatever.
For during these
just praying for peace, like, and it was like the most surrealist, like, like the bullets are flying like the tanks, the bombs, and then Buddhists singing Hare Krishna.
Oh my god.
Or whatever.
That's
and
crazy.
It's like,
it sounds like
or like some
really bizarre,
like not Buddhist, like Krishnas or whatever, like this. Also after like the collapse, there were some different like religions started to arise in Russia, and also like there was some movement, but it was just like very surreal. All right, so it's just conjuncture of everything, like of
crazy,
of violence, of religion. And then my father and like he just went there on his car with my brothers, and then it was crazy story, man. Like, really, it was everything. For my family, it turned out well, like nobody died, so everything is alright. But yeah, this conflict between Yeltsin and the parliament in the 93 was pretty violent. Like, I think more than 100 people died on the streets, because it was like the riot, it was kind of like a riot, and then it was like broke up by the riot police and by the military, so a lot of people died actually, because they were also trying to capture like the Protestants, trying to capture like the TV, the national TV, and with guns and stuff. So it was like a nation, like it was kind of like a civil war. It was a big, it could be like a civil war, a massive civil war actually, because as it happened, I don't know, like in a lot of countries like Yugoslavia, right? When the big system, the old system collapsed, then everyone started to pursue their own interest, and that's why it's very shaky. It's always very shaky. So, and we had our civil war, kind of like war in Chechnya, right? So, you could regard it as a civil war, and it started like 1994, I guess, and it also like a big part of our like a national trauma. Yeah, exactly, that's a good word, because it just happened just like 20 something years ago, 25 years ago, and still a lot of like people like Brat, it's also about it, like, right, because the main character Danilo Bagrov, he went through this war, and it was just like classic experience of this like post trauma. Then he kind of doesn't know how to behave in the normal world, in the normal reality, because like after you've been in a war, everything seems to you like not important, like the routine, the daily routine, it's not that like kind of like exciting anymore. And it's I think one of the greatest tragedies in the history like of the modern Russia, because really it changed a lot of stuff, and still it continues to have a huge effect on our life.
So it wasn't only an economic crisis before, because people, of course, they didn't have the monetary background, or everything is like in change. But I think, how did it affect, like we said, like the national psyche? Like if you have the stability, like as humans, we have the stability of a system for, let's say, like 40 years. Everything is taken care of during the Soviet system.
The Soviet system. Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, also in the GDR, the former German Republic, then all of a sudden, all what you believe in is gone. Like it's completely gone. And then how does it affect still the people? I think that's the interesting point to understand the modern Russia, this crucial period of the 1990s. I remember I went to Russia, and the doors, they all had these like 6 locks, like in a row sometimes. Yeah. And it's just like a stupid fact that I observed. But then I asked, why do they have the locks? And then also the owner, he was like, okay, that was during the 90s. Anybody could come, and you might get shot, like, or you're just afraid of it. So I think you made it really clear how it affected and how it still affects the people, like this critical period of the 90s. Yeah. And what more in pop culture do you know about like this period? And there are these songs like
from Brat as well.
Yeah, from Brat and the chansons. Chansons.
Chanson, yeah.
Could you explain what that means?
Chanson, I think it's definitely has connection with 90s, but it's mostly like the songs of like criminals, basically. Yeah. But it has, I think, deeper roots because, like, Russia in the 20th century has a long story of prisons and imprisonment, and I think criminal culture as well affected a lot our language and our pop culture. Mm-hmm. So we have a lot of sayings like that initially was like brought by like criminals, like and a lot of them, it's actually interesting topic, like a lot of them are coming from German, you can say, because it's Yiddish, and Yiddish has a lot of like German words, and we have a lot of concepts in Russia. Like the most important concept is the Brat, and it's like nepotism or something, like when you have someone, and then
kind of like family corruption or something.
Like family corruption. And it's initially like the word, it's from Yiddish and that was spoken by criminals, like parts of like criminal society in Odessa, which is now in Ukraine, and then like somehow all this like criminal world, it has its deeper roots in this region, because it was like mostly Jews living there, and they had this real impact on the language on the long run.
But they were just like, they were also forced in the ghettos, like they couldn't get access to like ordinary society, and then they
were forced, like, I mean,
like they couldn't become, let's say, sometimes like part of the official administration, so they were more in trades and like also in Germany, like merchants, because they could give interest also. Because it was like the line of settlement, or I don't know, the pale of settlement, how do you call it, when like Jews could not, like in the Russian Empire, they couldn't live in the major part, in the European parts of, like, not European, like the big cities or whatever, so they lived some like in rural areas and small town or something like that.
My family actually, from the father's side, they come in from one of these small places called Местечко in Russian. It's like a small place, and then it's where like Jews basically was like.
Is it in Belarus?
It's in Ukraine.
Ukraine, okay.
It's called Yekaterinendorf.
Okay, the German way.
So it has clear German Yiddish influence.
But this how you see it, draw the lines also between like. There's such a deep interconnection between Russia, Germany. Then there's this huge like German, Jewish, Russian culture, and like the connections go so deep. Like when somebody says like nowadays, okay, we have to stop talking, or it's like so narrow-minded, because like the connections go so long into our common history, I would say. Or would you agree to that? Or?
Yeah, I would completely 100% agree with you, because I actually think like Germans and Russian, they have this thing between each other, like we kind of like
it's like a hate-love maybe.
Yeah, hate-love situation, exactly.
Hassliebe we call it in German.
What do you call it?
Hassliebe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the same.
Hassliebe, it's the same. What is it in Russian? Or is it?
I'm not sure there is such a concept in Russian, but yeah, I don't know. No, there is no like direct translation. No. So, but yeah, I completely agree with you that we have deep interconnections, like German and Russian culture. So, and sometimes because in Russian, like, we are very fascinated by like German technology in general, like German industry, and everything that is German by default, it's like perfect. Like German is perfect. In Russian,
the quality
like, it has like this kind of like correlation, like connotation. Like everything is German, it's just perfect. And so yeah, it's like, and I think in Germany as well, because like you're a perfect example, like the way how you also like fascinated by Russian culture. You read much more Russian literature than I did. So, and then it's also.
I think from the German side, what we admire from Russia is like this. First is like the country, the vastness of the country, because Germany is such a small country. Like Jeanine from Canada and from Russia. Now we have the two biggest countries in the world. Germany, in comparison, such a small place. Like everything is in reach. Everything is like in proportion. Whereas like Germany in Russia would be like some small like micro state or something. And then so it's one like the vastness of the country, which is also have this connotation of maybe wilderness, like nature. So I think that's what we admire. But also maybe more.
But I think culture.
The culture,
and like
we've got this thing for the old history, and the Russians really keep their traditions. I think more than Germans, I would say.
But I think it has like also like metaphysical stuff going on, because like it's like Russians and Germans, they sometimes more dark. I don't know. They darker. They like more existential to discuss and to dig a bit deeper in everything. So
the Americans are more like the trading nations, and the
more
Brits
like superficial.
The French, they have got their philosophical, like the salon, like this like the standard of civilization, that's what I call it. And Germany is more like this culture, like this notion of having a culture where you have to continuously work on. I think that is like the main difference between culture and civilization. Yeah,
and has a lot of like connections also philosophically, like for example, like Nietzsche and Dostoevsky, for example. They're like it's like a two sides of the same coin, more or less, like in the sense how they describe like the nihilism and like the death of God in the modern world.
Yeah, maybe Germany and Russia, what they share is that we both are nations that are a bit like we are latecomers in terms of nation building. Whereas like France, UK, they had their nations.
And we're continental empires, right?
Continental empires, exactly. And Germany was always trying to like make up for having not so much space by trying to conquer the world then.
It's like concept of Lebensraum. So you don't have enough place to live.
Yeah, we have to settle somewhere.
Oh yeah, can you explain what Lebensraum is?
It's the idea that, how would you explain it? It's the idea that basically, Germany should have colonies, I would say, and then colonize, since the other nations, they had their colonies in other continents. Germany would have like to go to east, like to get the colonies there, pretty much. But it's just like this concept of geopolitical enlargement, expansion. And I think when we talk about Russia, there are so many. There's so much that unites us, and what I'm interested in, how do younger Russians view Germany, for instance, or the West? Like how would they, like, you're the best example. studying here in Germany. There are a lot of Russians that go to Germany, or your brothers in the US.
Yeah.
You've got your family is spread out, and what do you think about that?
I think in general, like in Russia, I think young culture now, it's very vibrant. It's on the rise. So I think youngsters, they're more open-minded, and they have like less prejudice about stuff. So I think I am pretty optimistic about it. So I'm pretty optimistic that in the future generations, they basically, like, especially now, they consume like the same culture basically, like it's globalism. So they are, maybe one of the sad parts, it's like still they do not really speak English that much. So I think that kind of prevents them from interacting more with the foreigners in general. Still, I think even like in the younger generation, it's present from what I can see. But on the other point of view, I think, for example, last year it was like perfect example of when the World Cup, like when it was World Cup in Russia.
That was a tipping point, I think.
Yeah, I think it was like a pivotal point when also a lot of Russians realized that, like, I don't know, Westerners, Europeans, like general, like they're the same people as they. So like,
oh, what a surprise! Yeah. The Westerners say, "Oh, Russians are pretty nice."
Yeah, Russians are not like bears riding on like motorcycles with balalaika and drinking
playing the
vodka.
balalaika.
Yeah, it's like it's just like we're just. No, we're people like what?
It's so funny when you think about it. Like also for Germany, a lot of people still, when I think back, they thought, all Germans are like pretty much like Nazis or so.
Yeah.
But when the World Cup came, also it changed. Like people coming to Germany,
really?
Yeah.
But it was like 2006 or.
Yeah, it was 2006.
But it was pretty late.
Yeah, but the thing is, before German, we have this weird concept, like there's no German patriotism like in Russia, where you have these showing your war arsenal or something.
That's something that arose like in the last 10 years. So it's not like something like the old Russian patriotism has nothing to do with it. So,
but in Germany we are not supposed to wave the flags, and then I think with the World Cup it changed because it became something like an event. So I think that this exchange really changed the perceptions of the outside world towards Germany as well. So maybe also for Russia it could have. Some people say like the World Cup is just to show like the strength, but I think just from the fact of exchanging people and ideas, I think it's really cool.
Yeah, I agree that it was really beneficial for us to keep in mind that we're all humans, and there are not so many like significant differences. And I think also for Russia, it was for young Russians. I think it was also a big deal because it's like everything changed. Like for 1 month, Moscow and like big cities, they became very free. Like in the sense of like police presence, for example. Usually in Russia you can't drink on the streets. Like it's forbidden. It's forbidden. Like it's not like in Germany. But during this 1 month, like it's like everything was permitted. Like you could drink because for foreigners. It was, they wanted, the main concept in Russia, like such a big projects as like World Cup or Sochi Olympiad, it's like we want to show to the West that we're wealthy, where we can organize everything. So like not we, but like the government. But so that's why they really invest a lot of money into it, and they did a lot of really invest a lot of money, so they wanted to show it. So that's why they also sometimes it's very like ambiguous situation when you feel like they were treating like foreigners much better than they were treating Russians normally. Because when foreigners came, it's all permitted like to drink on the streets. So the police were like they suddenly became I don't know like British policemen, or like this picture of like this very kind policeman who is very not like a typical.
Usually the Moscow police wouldn't be so polite.
Yeah, usually they're not. So but during the World Cup everything has changed, and a lot of people were hoping that it would continue to be this way, but of course it didn't. And so it was mostly like it was not. It was just like a vacation. Like it was just like a one short period of but would suddenly end it. But I think in the long run, I think it's still beneficial for the relationship between like Germans and Russians, and because I mean a lot of like stuff that's going on now, like on the administrative level between the countries, I think it will not continue forever. But like the relationships between people, between nations in general, like on the horizontal level, I think it should persist. So that's why I believe that we should communicate. So communication, as you mentioned, like World Cup, it's not only about showing up. It's also about like making connections and stuff. So
it's I think opening up to the outside world. And how do younger people of our generation, how do they communicate? What are they using for social media? What technologies?
Like mostly it's like VKontakte, VK, like the Russian Facebook.
Is more like the Russian Facebook.
Like Russian Facebook. But I mean now I think it's very also funny because the main like messenger app in Russia, it's Telegram. It's not WhatsApp. But the funny thing is that Telegram was kind of like forbidden in Russia because the guy who invented it, like who built it's Pavel Durov. He also built VK before, but he had like some conflicts with Russian police or something. So I mean, some Russian oligarch, and then he had to immigrate, and then he created Telegram and stuff. But at some point, Russian government like put a restriction on using Telegram in Russia. But it still works. Like they couldn't do anything with it, and it still works. And a lot of like if you meet a random Russian, most probably he will use Telegram, the messenger app that is officially like forbidden. So it's just fine because everything else is like, we're not like China, right? We're like everything you can use Facebook, Google, or whatever. Like, but the only like technology that is developed by a Russian is forbidden in modern Russia. So it's very interesting concept, don't you think? So.
What do you think about, like, you're also a programmer, you work for Amazon.
Yeah.
It's funny because actually we both started pretty much like into our business career almost simultaneously.
Yeah.
But what's your take on German technology, for instance? How do you, like, if you compare Germany to Russia, how would you? Because I remember you also complaining. Complaining again.
It's like, I mean, sometimes I feel like when going from Moscow to Germany that in terms of like technology, Germany is falling behind a bit. But because as I think the thing is, it's because this concept like of like exponential linear development, because I think in the countries and developing countries in general, like Russia included, when firstly you had nothing and then like you started developing new technology, and then the rise is more like has an exponential curve. But in Germany I think it's more like linear, right? So maybe in some senses it takes more time for Germany to adopt new technology, because Germans are pretty conservative, right?
Yeah,
in general, especially because they don't use credit cards.
I think we are from internet access, we are almost like as some countries like Bulgaria or Mexico.
Yeah,
like,
in terms of like
nothing against these countries, but it's just like I think we could have been doing much better.
Yeah, in terms of like banking system, I think online banking in Russia it's more developed than Germany. But I mean, I'm not like an expert, so I can't say for sure. But yeah, in general, I think it's just maybe in Russia it's more like there's more like ambition because you need to develop something like brand new to monetize on it. So in Germany maybe it's more like flat, the distribution of wealth in general in Germany
is very
flat.
equal.
It's very equal,
but it's not so like spiky, like they're not like people that are super rich, but it's very like average,
yeah.
maybe. So.
I think it also has some impact in general on how people look at their careers, at themselves, because Russians are generally, I mean, they're ambitious. I would say, like, they really want to push hard to get to the top sometime. I mean, in general, I think we had this feature because I think it also has to do with our past, because when you have been through some shit, so that you need to get out of it, and then you understand you need to work hard, and it makes you, I think, more ambitious, and that's why I think Russians want to, like, they always strive like for new horizons. Or I mean, maybe it's too complimentary about Russians, but like in general, I think we had this. I mean, but the sad thing, as I said, sometimes you cannot accomplish it in your home country. Like Pavel Durov, the guy who created Telegram, and initially he was forced to leave Russia because, as I said, a lot of technology. I mean, a lot of technology, like this kind of development, it's not appreciated much by the government. So there is a lot of obstacles on your way when you want to develop something original, because
it's why nations fail.
Yeah, exactly. The lack of inclusive institutions.
No inclusive institutions. We should do an episode on this one.
Yeah, man. I finished it finally.
Hey, there we go.
Yeah, it was.
What is, like, we just, like, do you want to explain the concept of this, or just really short? Like the concept of Why Nations Fail is a book by Robinson Achimolu, I think.
Achimolu, yeah. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but.
And basically saying that nations should, try to have as much inclusive institutions, meaning that people should participate in political activities and not being like excluded from it. It's basically
exactly, like pluralism,
having disruptive technology comes,
like creative destruction,
concept, like. But we kind of digressed a bit. So going back to this topic that we discussed before, Russia and why Russia, IT startups, something like that. That's what do you see on the horizon? How do you forecast it?
Yeah, that's also like a hard question to answer. I mean, we have, like, now we're observing like a trend that the government gets more and more concerned about, like, the free internet, about the distribution, like the free distribution of technology and of information. So that currently, like, there was some laws introduced in the parliament that put more restrictions on the Russian internet. So in general, like, it's not officially like called like a Russian firewall, like, you know, like
Russian
like
regional
China,
internet,
like in China, but and I'm not sure that we have, like, Russian government has technology that could prevent it. They could implement it actually, but this trend it concerns me a lot, because now it's the whole life, this vibrant youngster culture that I was talking about. It's mainly based in the internet. It's like all the rise, like, of YouTube blogs, because YouTube in Russia, it's very popular. It's like by far the most popular, I think, blog platform, like, in terms of how many people watch it. And it really became like a mediator, like, and a lot of journalists who before worked on the TV, they realized that TV is dead and they don't have enough freedom to express themselves, and they opened like new YouTube channels, and then actually they even, one of them, it's very like the guy started doing it like just interviews with rappers.
Okay.
But finally he started, like, he went a bit more deeply. He started to do documentaries. For example, one of them, last documentaries that he did was about Kolyma. It's like about Gulag, about Russian Gulag.
Yeah.
And he went to the places when it was located. And
Gulag is the Russian arrest camp or something, like concentration camp.
Concentration camp, like penitentiary system, like a concentration camp basically. And within this part of our history of the 20th century that it's not like a taboo, but a lot of people still don't know much, and they don't want to talk about it. And then he kind of like opened up this wound, but in the good sense, in the sense that we want to understand where we're going, we need to understand what happened to us before. So then I think this documentary on YouTube, it was like, I don't know, it's how many, like 10 or like 50 million views now. So it's really popular.
Yeah.
And it has like subtitles in English, by the way. So if you're interested, guys, you can also check it out, because the way how it's done, I think it's very interesting. And so yeah, as I said, like there is a lot of most interesting stuff that's going on now in Russian pop culture. I mean, of course, it's happening in the internet, because like television is dead, and like we don't have so much interesting like movie culture over there. I mean, there is some like underground.
There's some cool movies.
There's some like they're more like underground, but.
Yeah, the rappers. We watched some rappers together. Yeah. So I figured that like rap battles are very powerful also right now. They have got their momentum right now.
They accumulated momentum, I think, 2 years ago, but then there was at the peak, but then kind of everything saturated.
Yeah.
It was like they went to the mainstream, and then when something original went to the mainstream, it kind of loses its momentum. Originality, yeah. So then it's kind of like it's still there, but it's not. I mean, the quality of the rap battles in general kind of saturated. So
I was also wondering, after the Soviet Union, a lot of like there's also. When we talk about these stereotypes, there's like the strong, macho Russian, like who doesn't show emotion. And then there's like the super smart Russian physicists or rocket scientists. And I think after the Soviet Union, or even before, a lot of these engineers, or when you think about like Sergey Brin, like all these like super smart people, they moved to the US, or to some of them to Western Europe, and a lot of them have like also Russian Jewish backgrounds, and they are just like the brain drain of the system. Like I think that this was also like a powerful thing. I mean, if Russia could have kept all this capacity, maybe the country would have been also one of maybe the leading IT nations. Also, the founder of WhatsApp is Ukrainian.
Is Ukrainian, I think, also Jew or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
I agree on that, because that's my main concern about the modern Russia. Like as our topic suggests, is that I don't actually think that the modern Russian government needs this creative destruction in a way how Ajamoglu described in this book, Why Nations Fail, because they don't need this pool of talented people because they do not want to develop like the high-end technology. They more like watch on Russia still as like the pool of natural resources.
Yeah.
And to export natural resources, you don't need much of like high-end technology. So that's why I'm a bit skeptical in the sense that that we could keep it this potential. That way, I think we're wasting this potential, because I agree on you. We have a lot of like brain power, or like we have a lot of smart people.
Yeah.
And like
even for Amazon, you told me like a lot of Russians work in your unit, and it's like the science unit. I mean, it's really hard to get into this program, right? So there, like the education system is still like pretty good, or like based on natural sciences, and maybe a bit theoretical, or
maybe that's the difference. I'm not saying I have also a lot of comments about the Russian educational system, because I think it's actually pretty bad, but somehow I think maybe we still has this momentum that from the Soviet Union, when we had this urge to study natural sciences a lot and like to go deeply into math. Then, for example, I think Jeanine, you once told me that, for example, in Canada, like the way how they teach math is different. Like it's not that deep.
How would you describe it? Like also in comparison to German.
Well, like for example, like I studied computing science, but we didn't have as much an emphasis on math as I guess your education was for computing science. I feel like a lot of the Russians that I met here, they're really good at math when it comes to computing science, and I feel like mine had to do more with like I don't know, like I took maybe 3 like specific math classes in my entire bachelor's degree, but for you that wasn't the case, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I mean, you mean 3 semesters of
3 classes.
3 classes.
I think so. That's as far as I remember.
Okay.
Yeah. You're just like, oh, yikes.
Yeah, for me it was like the first 2 years of my bachelor was mainly about math.
Yeah.
So it's like 2 years. You don't... That's what my main concern... But I think I haven't graduated like from the top tier university in Russia in terms of like natural sciences actually. So, but we had still, I think, strong math school in terms of like professors, in terms of teachers. I think they were mainly from this like old school Soviet system. So I think the fundamental science is still there, I would say. So that's why it makes it strong. I think like the general like the Soviet math school is very strong. So that's why. But I think in terms of application power, like I would say that we were lacking to some extent the applied part of like computer science. So it was mainly focused on theory.
Okay, yeah.
But I also, I think, received some comments that I think German system is also more focused on theory.
Yeah, I would say so,
it's very theory. And I also realized that you are much better at like teamwork or all like practical stuff. I think it's more part of your education system to work in teams.
Yeah, it's pretty common to have like group projects and stuff. Did you have that a lot in your bachelor's or not so much?
Not so much. We had some labs when we worked together, but group projects, no, I don't think so.
Okay, yeah, it was a very common thing. So I think it's cool though that you have different like groups of people who are specialized in a certain thing, and I think that's what we need. Like we need people who are very good at math, and we need people who are very good at like the more soft skills and stuff. So I think it's cool because like your master's program was also like an international program, right? Same with mine, and I think it was really cool to see people from different educational backgrounds to come together because y'all learned generally the same thing but at different angles. And I think that made it it was really interesting to work with a bunch of different people. But yeah.
I had a question that I almost forgot, but it was about like what was it?
Let's reconstruct it.
So we can try to reconstruct it by going through what we talked about. So we talked about your family.
Backtracking.
Yeah, backtracking. Talking about your family history, that was really interesting. Going back into the Soviet Union and Brat. What is pop culture in Russia? What's the impact? What's a bit of like the economic system differences between West and East? But I think that I just found what I was looking for, which is like we talked about Brat in the 90s, and we had I learned a bit of Russian through like this whole culture of mud. So can you explain on that? Because mud is okay, maybe just you explain it better.
Yeah, because mud is a very peculiar feature of Russian.
That's a good takeaway for everybody from the podcast.
That's the main takeaway. I think the mud it's very special in Russian culture, but it's interesting. I think its origins.
What does it mean first?
It means like curse language.
Mud means
what
your mother. Ruski mud is mother.
Ah, okay.
It's might is mother. Might is mother.
Yeah.
But no, mud, it just like cursing language. Like
it's swearing.
Swearing.
Okay,
like it's swearing. It's basically swearing. So and materica, it's to swear. But the main concept of mat, it's very interesting because I think it also has a lot of background in the 20th century of Russia, because a lot of it, because it's very I would say, I wouldn't use this adjective baroque, but it's has a lot of branches and it's it has there are a lot of combinations. So basically you can construct a lot of different words by using literally 3 roots.
I think
or 4. Yeah, maybe 4.
Should I say it?
What?
Should I try to say it?
I mean, it would be better than if you say it than me, because
one is хуй. One is пиздец.
You need to shorten it a bit. Pizda. Yeah.
Then the third is I forgot. Brat.
Yeah.
And the fourth, I forgot what would it be? I mean, they are all words really vulgar words.
Suka, you can also say, but it's.
What do these words mean? Your
Look
face
it up. They're all the words, bad words.
How on the, I guess on the scale of mild to really bad, where do they lie?
Really bad.
Oh, really? Okay.
It's interesting because most of this language, I think it's originated back in the in the Slavic culture, but I think it was very developed during the 20th century, and it has also this connection with Gulag and with criminal culture, because the thing is why it's so rich, this type of language. I think it has a lot to do with the language that that was used in among criminals, not real criminals, but as I said, in the Gulag there were a lot of people from different backgrounds who were thrown there just because they didn't agree with the government or whatever. So it was just a different culture, underground culture, that in the end was opened up, and it became common culture as well. So that's why I think Russian curse language, Russian swearing, it's so interesting. It's interesting from the linguistic point of view as well, because the way how you can literally get words with absolutely different meanings, just shuffling a bit the suffixes and the prefixes. So we could go deeply into that, but I also don't want to curse a lot during.
You can say some. I know, блядь, прошли все нахуй мударки.
No, there was funny video with Elizabeth Olsen, American actress. And she
lived in Russia for a year or so.
Yeah, she had a Russian boyfriend, and she was swearing, I think Jimmy Kimmel's show or whatever, I don't know. She was she would say пиздец нахуй, блядь, something like that. So but it sounded very funny, very cute. The way how she said it was very cute. So in general speaking, I think I'm pretty proud of Russian swearing, because the way how you can describe,
so creative, right?
Yeah, it's so creative. It's really it's really one of my favorite writers, especially contemporary writers, we discussed it with Tobias, Vladimir Sorokin. Yeah, and he's a magnificent stylist. He can come up with the different styles in his books, and also he's very familiar with Russian swearing language and the way he.
What's his best book? What would you recommend? The Winter Storm, I think. Is it
the Winter Storm, but it's a short one. But the main one, I think,
the utopian or dystopian one. What was it?
Dystopian Telluria.
Telluria.
It's one of the last ones, but my favorite ones of the day of Oprichnik. Oprichnik, it's
also
intelligence service in the times of Ivan the Terrible, I would say so.
We should have gone back to Ivan the Terrible. We forgot about that.
Yeah,
it's a Tarkovsky movie. Okay, next we have got it.
Yeah, but he is like he's like a writer, but like a very appreciated writer. Like he won like different writing contest or whatever. But the way
is he more accepted now, or is he right-leaning more?
He was underground. I mean, he began as an underground writer like back in the 80s. One of these like major novels. It's like The Norm, on like Norma in Russian. It's mind-blowing. It's absolutely mind-blowing. So yeah, I think it's translated to English and I think to German as well, because he's also a lot in this German counterculture scene. So he's also a painter. So he lives in Germany, I think, most of the time, and he's good with like German culture in general, German TV or whatever. So yeah, I mean that's the way I brought him up. It's because the way how he puts these words, how he constructs like different stories that are built based on the particular like swearing words, and the way how he uses it, this is an art. I mean, this is just an art, and that's why when we talk about like the Russian swearing language, I usually just enjoy to use it because in some cases, I mean, to describe a lot of shit that's going on in Russia, you need a very particular language, and you always needed it. Like alongside the whole Russian history, we have a lot of stuff going on, so to say. So that's why we constructed the very special words, the only words that could describe all this shit show. So
it's like that is like the Russian mat is almost like a second language, I would say. Like if you start learning Russian, you learn like the official Russian, but then if you hear like younger people talk, and it's very hard to understand. That's why I think like
I mean, because
Russian is so hard to learn because of the creativity of mat, of all these words that actually like most people use, but it's for foreigners I think it's an obstacle first to learn it a bit.
But then how you should start it, like with learning.
Start either with the official or with math.
Yeah, learning the essentials.
Learning the essentials of math. I think learning cursing in the beginning is a good way to learn a language in general.
I find that with a lot of language learning, it starts off with swears because that kind of like motivates you, and it, like I don't know, you like gain an appreciation for like being able to say something, and then you go, okay, well maybe I can say more than just swear.
I mean, English is also like swearing culture. So far we haven't been swearing at all, I would say. I haven't used the F word.
I think in general I don't swear that much though.
You don't swear, right?
It's not like I go like no swearing, but it's just something that I've never really, I don't know.
Now I find it a bit in English, it's a bit boring, because like when you hear like podcasts and they're all like F all the time, it's like okay, with
it's
this podcast
it's
like, but when as a German, for instance, you want to learn English, you overdo it usually then.
I did notice that at first, like a lot of Germans would swear in English a lot more than I would swear in English. But I don't know, I think I think it's cool. I know that there's a book that I would actually be interested in reading. It's called like The History of Swearing.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and I think it probably goes into like current swear words and like how they've developed. And
you mean in English?
In English. And I think it'd be really cool to see like how like the history of like cursing in Russian is, because especially also like with Russian and also with like Spanish.
In Spanish is a lot of curses.
There's a lot of like context to it. It's not just a word, and there's a lot of
colorful curses.
Yeah.
I think
German not so much.
I think I read. I mean, I listened to podcasts about it, about the history of different cursing words in different languages, and I think like in Latin cultures like Spanish or Italian, I think it's more about blasphemy, like when you curse the god
or the godmother, or
the godmother,
or your mother. Like it's always like a
the mother.
Relationship, the mother, and it's also religion has some part in it.
Yeah.
And I think German, it's mostly about shit.
I heard this too.
You're kind of fixated on.
Like it's a Freudian concept.
Yeah, exactly. Because Freud has this concept of like different stages of development of a kid, and like he also projected different nations on different stages, and like Germans are
anal fixated. But with like these is it mutt? Is that how you say it? But,
Mutt, yeah.
like, is there a certain like theme that they kind of?
It's purely about sex. It's just everything is about sex and like obscene language. It's just it's not much about like blasphemy or like anal fixation, so like on shit or whatever. So it's mainly about like sexual relationships. So that's why the main like Russian curses, they all based on the names of genitalia, so genitals. So
but it's weird because when you think like they also Russians, I would say still are very more religious than Western Europeans.
That's like, I mean, a lot of people keep saying me that.
Or do you think it's not the case? Like in the Soviet Union, there was no religion.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I think it's. I think everything in Russia now, it's so, like it's very. Russian is like postmodern.
Postmodern.
It's like the country where postmodern won. It's like the country built by the postmodernists. Because the Sorokin, the guy who wrote it, I think he described it 20 years back. He described how Russia would be now, and he's a postmodernist. So it's like work of art. It's like our modern Russia. It's like work of art. But it's the ways it is projected on the nation that we're religious, we're very like traditional, because like Putin has now this like a bit like right.
He's going more into the churches, the popes.
But
is that just like
I think
hoax,
it's just a hoax. It's just like a political game. So I think most of Russia. I mean, according to official statistics, only 3% of Russians, if I'm not mistaken, they go to church regularly. I mean, I mean, in my point of view, you're religious. I mean, if you go to church, I mean, if you do some masses or like some religious, you not just say in the conversation, "Oh, I believe in God," and it doesn't make you like a true Christian if you don't follow the traditions and liturgy and stuff. So in that sense, a lot of Russian, they just, if they ask them if you're like Orthodox, they say, "Yeah, of course I'm Orthodox," but it's just like more like self-identification. Like I'm Orthodox because it's like what they believe, that what makes me Russian, that like then I should say that I'm Orthodox, but they do not actually. I think they are still very secular. I think Russia is a still very secular country due to like the long history of Soviet Union, I think. And I mean, maybe in my family, it's also interesting because like my grandmother on my father's side, she was actually an old believer. She was not Orthodox. She was like part of this traditional Orthodox church that like diverged like back in the like 17th century.
Also in Dostoevsky, always like these old believers, right?
Yeah, like they were really like strict. They were very like old-fashioned in the way how they do things. Very kind of like. They had like their traditions, like the way they are liturgies. They was much more stricter, I think, than classic Orthodox, but the modern Orthodox. But the way I think, I mean, maybe in the rural areas, people like in the villages, they more religious. But I think in the big cities, like in metropolitan areas, I think nobody actually gives it that much about religion. So I mean, still they would tell that they do, but if you, in my point of view, if you don't follow,
it's like a facade.
It's more like a facade. It's more like identification.
An identity.
Because identity, because it's like the lack of. Is another point, like with the 90s and the Brat that we discussed. It's like Russia. It's a very new country, you could say, because like as a nation, we're very young, because like because I mean as a nation state, because like Russian Empire, it was basically not the country of Russians. It was just like some guys, they treated others as their property, like it's not like a nation. So then there was like communist rule, when basically like Bolsheviks, they treated Russians mostly like a pool of resources that they used like to do like industrializations, to fly to space or whatever. So it was just like a pool of resources and nothing much apart from that. So it's like current like Russia, like in the 1991, there was the first time then like the first attempt to build like a Russian kind of nation state.
Yeah.
And then it needed like a new set of ideas. So and then it never worked. Sometimes I think it never worked out, because now we're kind of like sliding back to this Soviet patriotism combined with old like Russian imperialism from the Russian Empire. So it's like just a weird like monster of Frankenstein, when just you collect different like
that is like what you discussed, like the you mentioned a few times, like Russia being like this postmodern state.
Yeah,
right?
I think
so
it's
how,
my
how
description. Like Russia is a postmodern state, that nothing is real, nothing that that they say they really believe in it. Like they could say that that we're fighting with the West, where Russia is like it's like a third Rome, we have our own unique way of doing things, so it has nothing to do with Europe. But at the same time, they all have bank accounts in Switzerland.
The elite, they all have their
all their
properties.
All their properties are there, all the children are there, and so it's completely like it's just a facade. So it's like it's like now it's mainly they use this rhetoric, they use this propaganda, because they kind of like plays on like the former propaganda of the Soviet Union, and then a lot of people, they still reminisce about Soviet Union times when everything was more clear, like in the sense it
was clear, it was easy, like you have patterns, like
you have patterns.
That is the enemy. But I think also in the West there's like a bit nostalgia about like the East, like you have clear enemy images, like what's going on. So a lot of people now with this like globalized world are like, okay, who's like fighting against whom? Like capitalism is like the West is kind of like muddling through, like you're looking for something like there's also a crisis of values here, I would say. So that's probably why Putin and Russia, they are trying to establish something like where like they are looking also for the outside to blame, like to distract from other stuff.
Yeah, it's like classic. Yeah. Like you just need a common enemy, so you just instead of building something by yourself, you just criticize and use as a negative example, so you can find an excuse why, like if everything is something, for example, is not working, you just find an excuse why you're not going to fix it, because like I don't know, in Russian we have this saying, like the Soviet propaganda uses it a lot, like they say like the black people are being lynched in the US if something bad happens in the Soviet Union. They
like in charts,
like how they treat like black people there. So it's like the common saying that instead of fixing our things and like getting our shit together, you just find an excuse why you not do it, because I don't know, somewhere there something like in the Europe, I don't know, something is bad is happening or whatever. So it's just always find an excuse why you don't want to fix it. So
on the other side, I also find interesting, because a lot of scholars now, they're also looking at the way how the West was not really willing to help Russia afterwards. And I think it's also something like, because we don't want to like blame it's only Russia or West, like I think also the West did some terrible mistakes that actually, for instance, Putin, I think he was trying to, he even had this idea of having like a trade zone spanning from I think he said from Lisbon to Vladivostok.
Yes,
he had these ideas for economic integration. But then also the West was trying to, especially under Bush, I think, with the Kosovo War, Yugoslavia, like there was no UN mandate for it, so Russia felt then there's like this NATO stuff where they're trying to integrate Ukraine and Georgia, which is like clearly like first like the Russian zone of influence. So I think there was, at least the way how they communicated it, super unclever.
Exactly.
And I think that Russia deserved more also of integration towards like mutual exchange, at least.
That's absolutely true. I think that's the biggest part of this Russian resentment, like because most of the current propaganda, it builds completely on the feeling of resentment. It's like we were abandoned, like they like believe that like West they like destroyed Soviet Union, then we ended up in the poverty, and then they never helped us, and then we had
humiliation. Maybe.
Humiliation, yes, we were humiliated, and so now we need to avenge. Basically, that's one of the main concepts of like national identity. Unfortunately, I would say it's really present, even maybe mostly among like the older generation, but sometimes also among young people, I think, as well.
Yeah, so, Putin is very popular among like younger people as well, right? Or is it also like a postmodern?
Yeah, I mean, I don't.
Or is it like the image that he projects, or how
I mean,
I'm
not sure that he's popular among young people. I think the main the pool like his audience that he focused on, it's like middle-aged divorced Russian woman, because he's like strong. He's he's keeping his he's keeping himself fit, and he's has this image like masculine image that I think like this middle-aged like divorced Russian woman, which is very common in Russia. Like the divorce rate in Russia, it's higher.
It's the highest.
It's highest, I think, in Europe in general. So it's a very common pattern, and that's why I think it's the main kind of like group of people who I think supports him. So I think it's not that common in general that he's popular among young people. I think among my people that I know, they just completely like they're indifferent or they don't like him. So I don't have so many like Putin fans.
What I realized, I've been to Russia also, like to the biggest cities, Moscow, St. Petersburg, and Novosibirsk, which is like actually the three main cities. But then I went to a smaller city for a month, Yaroslavl in the Zolotoy, like the Golden Ring, these old Russian cities surrounding Moscow, and that was really different. So I think also, like you mentioned before, that Russia is very much so much divided, more than in Europe, between like the, let's say, like the bigger cities, maybe like the 4 or 5 bigger cities, and then like the countryside. And there's a big discrepancy, big gap between the population there. Have you been traveling also, like to some places in the countryside?
Unfortunately, like now I really regret about it, but when I was young, I'm still young, but when I was living in Russia, I'm 24.
Right.
So, but when I was living in Russia, I didn't really appreciate it. Like, and I was living in Moscow. When you live in Moscow, you feel like, I mean, you have everything here. Like you don't. Maybe it's a bit, that's part of the problem, I would say, because now I think that's the most crucial thing, like in Russia, what's going on, and you feel it like if you go to the countryside or like to other regions of Russia, that you feel this real people are really pissed off by Moscovites, like by people by the way Moscow treats other regions, by the way that it just soaks all the wealth are coming to the capital, they go into the capital, and then like basically a lot of other places in Russia, like people are struggling, people are literally struggling, and that's why, and it's getting worse and worse, because like Russia is very it's not, I mean, it's called Russian Federation, but really, I mean, from the administrative point of view, I think in reality it is not, because really all decisions are made in Moscow, and all money goes to Moscow. So, and especially now, like it's a big case in Russia, like the Siberian woods are burning, and currently, like in the very same moment, they have, nobody really takes care of it, so nobody really.
Is it also like a heat wave or?
Yeah, it was like a heat wave, but it's also like part of the huge problem of Siberia as well. But it's a long story short. Yeah, they feel very abandoned. Like a lot of people from like more distant regions in Russia, they feel like they are abandoned, and I mean it's true, they are. And if you're ambitious young man, you would probably go to Moscow to St. Petersburg, because there's not much you can do anyway, and the salary ranges are just completely mind-blowing. And that's why I was like so laugh about Germany, actually, that Germany is very like homogeneous, like it's very the wealth is very distributed among the country, and
it's very like federal state, not like Russia or France, which is mainly based on one big city, but here it's like the whole system. Also Germany as a late nation, a lot of different states. All German small city has an opera house, like there's no like big city as it is like Moscow. Like Berlin is still like big, but it's not like so like Berlin's 1/4 of Moscow probably or so, right? So it's like it's not such a history of centralization so much, but it's more equal in terms of like regional powers, like smaller regional powers, I would say. And that's an interesting story. Everything with Russia interests me. What do you have some words to teach the audience? Some like apart from math, like we should something like one nice like a nice saying or something like that. Something that you like to use, like as a takeaway.
Or like a Russian word that doesn't exist in English. Like a translation that can't be translated into English directly. That's what we were talking about.
Yesterday we had a topic, interesting, like word as concepts. Like in German you have got like Heimweh, Zeitgeist.
Zeitgeist, yeah.
And so in Greek there are a lot of these like concepts, words. I don't know if there are like I had the idea like Oblomovchina. It could be.
Wow.
Yeah.
Man. Wow. That's man. I'm so like surprised that you're so deep into Russian culture that even I mean most of Russians I think not familiar with this concept in general. So I mean although I
wanted to mention this before because it's maybe you can explain it a bit from the it's actually from a novel from
Goncharov, from Oblomov. It's just like the concept like of an aristocrat like this like who is I mean that has decaying, a longer story. Decay integrating aristocrat who is because of his position he does just lies on his sofa and just chilling
making the servant like the German it's a German servant Stolz his name
so like
he's very busy like he's
like
agile.
German is working and Russian is taking some rest
on the samovar I don't know, he's just laying on the samovar and this chilling, making him work.
So just a typical case like of this decaying Russian aristocracy, like a bit of decadence. But there is a lot of other words that I was also like wanted to touch this topic a bit, but when I was telling about the perestroika, glasnost, like freedom of speech, it's also like uniquely like Russian words that I think you can find it like in the Oxford Dictionary and what not. So one other like Sputnik, and like the satellite that the Soviets did, and then other like there are some bad words. Actually, I have haven't brought it. I think I've shown you. I have like the case for my Russian passport, like foreign passport, and where I have this lot of like stereotypical Russian words with the pictures, and it's also like Sputnik, pogrom. Not like just for like, I don't know, Chernobyl, Stalin, Putin, Arshadin, or whatnot.
That's
so like,
good.
and it's very nice. I like to show it to some like custom officers
Yeah.
in Germany. I mean,
cool.
it's also like a bit postmodern because like it's like
Playing with
stereotypes.
these concepts also, right?
Yeah,
No
just like
fixed
it's just
stuff.
like just concepts, and but yeah, it's funny. So yeah, one of them like yes, Sputnik we already described like also like the concept of intelligentsia.
Intelligent.
It's also a Russian word, and it has. I think now it's been used in French. I think in English, but in German.
Yeah, we also do
use intelligentsia.
Yeah.
So it's a pure like Russian word.
Oh, okay.
Like and it because it describes a Russian concept, the concept when like creative people who are not included in the political process, so instead of I don't know, taking their time to contribute somehow to the society, they like discuss it, write books about it, discuss it like do some kitchen talks like it was in
So
Soviet
it's like
Union.
the Bohemian or
They're not actually Bohemian. They mainly in Soviet Union. It was mainly like I don't know, engineers, teachers. They're not Bohemian. They're like mostly people who are somehow involved in the educational or medical system, or also in engineering, like scientists, for example. And they usually has this word has this connotation that they somehow has some kind of like political ideas which kind of like restricted in was restricted in Soviet Union, to that they had no way to describe it like officially. So that's why they either like they were living to other countries like Brodsky or whatever,
Yeah.
or they were doing this also Russian concept of like kitchen talk, like
kitchen talk, yeah.
like кухонные разговоры, when you talk politics in the kitchen, because like within your family, because you can't do it on the street. That's why we have this also very special concept. So
interesting. I just remembered, like, when you think about how many German words are also in Russian.
yeah,
When you talk about the exchange, like, that is what like struck me most for the beginning, because I remember like, okay, there are a lot of words coming from war, which is like Schlagbaum, Marschrot, but also like other words like basic Feuerwerki,
Rucksack,
Brusthalter, Perückmacher.
Perückmacher. Yeah.
It's
right.
hairdresser.
I've thought like
Perücke is
some
like
words-
wig. Right?
Yeah. Sometimes I even don't think about it, and then I just like randomly like see a German word and say, "Whoa, it sounds like in Russian."
Yeah,
So,
yeah, it's really cool. Or Karandash, or is it French?
Karandash, it's in Russian as well. Karandash.
Yeah, but I think it's
But it's coming from French.
it's French.
What does it
yeah.
mean?
The
Pencil.
pencil.
Oh, okay.
Sounds really cool.
Yeah, that sounds cool.
But there are more German words, like Zeitgeist probably also.
Zeitgeist.
Yeah.
Maybe like Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, like all German philosophy of will, stuff like that. It's probably like also in Russian.
Yeah, maybe like I don't know, like somehow like Dasein or from
Dasein, yeah.
It's like from Heidegger.
Heidegger. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, like as we started, Russian culture and German culture that have a lot of in common, in the sense how they the relationship between these cultures, how over time I think it's interesting to look at something really interesting. And
yeah, I think we would have much more to discuss. I think that was an amazing. Take that, Joe Rogan. We have 90 minutes already.
I remember you were like worried that you didn't have enough to say.
Yeah,
I was like,
first you're like, how much time can we actually talk? No, that's by far the longest.
I was like, I have total confidence in you being able to like talk about it.
Like you told me that. but I just haven't realized that. But
we learned. I think we really learned a lot about
definitely
like your family history, Russian, German, Jewish history, Mat, we learned some nice words, or exchanges between Russia, why nations fail, look at like contemporary Russia, what more. That was so amazing that you were here.
Broad range of
topics. And I think we should definitely do one on Russian writers. That would be cool.
Oh yeah, man. But in this sense, you will be an expert. And you will teach me about Russian literature, I think.
What is the writer? I just wanted to ask also that you mentioned, like the Russian Kerouac, like this writer that you brought up a couple of times. He's like the Russian Celine.
Right, Russian Celine. Yeah, it sounds
Celine. He's like
a bit complimentary to him, but he thinks he is a Russian Celine, and his name is Eduard Limonov.
Limonov. Yeah.
I think he is pretty popular in France, because he lived in France for a while, but he was kind of like underground writer in the in 20th century, and one of his books I could recommend, like in Russian it's called Это я, Edechka, but in English the translation is Fuck Off America or something like that. It's about when he immigrated to the US and he was living in New York City, and he was just like a bum, like a hobo. He hasn't any place to live.
So he also got disappointed by the American system. But he had high hopes, maybe.
Like he was like very disappointed, and then how he described it reminds a bit of how Celine described his experience in the US as well. So I mean, he has very questionable views in general, like Limonov, and especially now. But it's a long story, so as a writer I think this book that I mentioned, it's worth checking out if you're interested in Russian literature.
Oh yeah, like Moskva Pitushki, like the UFO. That's awesome. Like we have like with Russian literature we can fill like easy, hands down we should fill an episode with that one. Just I think it's what fascinates most German readers from Russian literature is also like it's so smart, like Gogol, Dostoevsky. It's always so different. Like the humor is different.
Yeah, it's witty.
It's clever. It's something that in like German literature is a bit, in comparison, I would say it's a bit like stale. It's a bit like stiff, whereas like the Russian literature has some panache. It's really
panache. Wow. Man.
No, it's
We're
cool.
Like
pulling out the fancy words.
Like fancy, like high society words, man.
Panache. It's это все. We should say something to finish in Russian. Это было офигенно. Большое спасибо для приглашения. Also, a lot of thanks for your visit.
Спасибо, что пришел.
Спасибо, что пришел.
А тебе спасибо за приглашение. Thanks for the invitation.
All right, thanks so much, Ilya.
Ilya, it was cool.
Thanks,
See you next time.
See you guys. Bye.
Bye.